Welcome back to Talking Dragon Age, the show where I talk about Dragon Age. Rounding out our discussion of ancient Tevinter, we have their first contact with the Elves. As with the previous two stories, this should be taken with a grain of salt. It's likely fictionalized, but more importantly, it's told from the perspective of Tevinter. They'll reinforce any aspects that make their actions seem justified, and downplay any aspects that do not. This unfortunately happens all the time in reality, and I'm finding Bioware is pretty good at imitating and incorporating fictional propaganda into their worlds. So this is the story of Thalassian, not to be confused with Thalcian, the first human dreamer, or Tarsian, a previous usurper king. Thalassian, the destroyer. So Tevinter was expanding eastward. There were scattered reports of figures from the forest watching or attacking travelers. Even back then, the forest was believed to be haunted, so Tevinter didn't take them too seriously. That was until legionnaires began to report skirmishes with these strange creatures with pointed ears. Tevinter realized the forest was held by a non-human race, so they sent in emissaries. They had already been in contact with the Dwarves, so the fact that they weren't human wasn't as surprising as you might think. Well, these emissaries Tevinter sent never returned, so they built a fortress near the edge of the forest to keep a constant watch. Over the course of a few decades, skirmishes with the Elves became more frequent and violent. Something strange happened in -998 Ancient. Sources say several Tevinter settlements in Arlathan vanished into the forest, never to be seen again. I don't know what exactly this means. Option 1, Tevinter had set up settlements in the forest itself, and all the people vanished. I don't know why they would set up settlements in the forest, knowing it was occupied by a hostile force and possibly haunted as well. Option 2, they set up settlements around the forest, and they just called the area Arlathan. And then people just vanished into the forest, probably taken by the Elves. Or option 3, they set up settlements around the forest, but then trees sprouted up and sort of consumed them. The text is very unclear about what happened. I can believe any of these options, but option 1 feels especially stupid on the part of Tevinter. So I guess that means it's the most likely. Well, after this, the people of Tevinter called out for war. In -981 Ancient, the Magisterium and Archon decided they'd march their legions into the forest. They found the large city and laid siege to it. It lasted 6 years, and it was a struggle. During this time, some tribes in the south took the opportunity to rise up and attack Tevinter's southern border. With that demanding their attention, Tevinter worked a crazy blood magic spell that sunk the elven city into the ground. The remaining elves were enslaved. Then they turned back to fight the attacking tribes and crushed them too. For almost 2,000 years after these events, Tevinter would brag that they sunk the great elven capital of Arlathan. They probably did not. Personally, my theory is they destroyed a city. The Elves talked about how great their city of Arlathan was, so Tevinter just assumed that was it. There was a clan of Vikings that believed they had sacked Rome and went around bragging about it, when in reality they had sacked a much smaller city called Luni, and they were presumably very embarrassed when they found out. That's how I imagine Tevinter versus Arlathan. Tevinter destroyed a city, and assumed it was this Arlathan the Elves kept talking about. It's also possible that by this time the surviving Elves had actually called this city Arlathan, or like New Arlathan, trying to recapture their glory. Following this influx of new slaves and expansion south, Tevinter began seeing a lot more human mages born, the implication of which makes me sick to my stomach. At the time, magic was believed to be gifted to the worthy by the gods, so having so many new mages posed a problem. Revolution followed, led by Tedarian, who you may know from his magic greatsword. Tedarian was a low-born mage taken as an apprentice by the Archon, but the Magisterium didn't like this. By the time the Archon died, Tedarian was his only heir. The Magisterium refused to recognize him, but he had overwhelming support from the mage lower class. Tedarian died in the course of the conflict, but by the end, the new Archon decided to give in and admit the lower classes into the temples, and gave them some representative seats in the Magisterium. Figured I should talk about that. So then, over the course of centuries, the Elves largely forgot their old culture, only really being able to attempt to reclaim it when Andraste rose up against Tevinter almost 1,000 years after Tevinter conquered them. Of course, we know some isolated pockets of ancient Elves survived in far-flung corners of the world, such as in the Arbor Wilds. Most of the survivors from the shattered empire of Elvenon were eventually enslaved by Tevinter, even if they weren't in the Arlathan Forest at the start. For example, some dwarves in Cad Halash took in some elven refugees, but the dwarves sacked their own city to cover it up so they wouldn't jeopardize their alliance with Tevinter. 1,000 years is a long time, and so only the most isolated pockets of elves avoided Tevinter. But even a lot of them would have died out from other elements, such as starvation. So that about does it for Ancient Tevinter. I wanted to get all this talked about before the Dreadwolf comes out. That title's going to take some getting used to. So let me know what you guys think, and let me know what other Dragon Age related videos you'd like to see, smiley face. So that's it for now, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment and like, and remember, Tala Nadas.